Will President Trump run in 2024? According to a new Politico report, the president's recent conversations with those in his circle reveal a 2024 run would maybe a way to stay relevant, help sustain his business, but he also may just not do it.
Just as Trump considers a future run, GOP leaders are starting to actually acknowledge Joe Biden's victory for the first time this week after the Electoral College officially affirmed Biden's win. Democratic strategist Jennifer Holdsworth and Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard, both joined us to discuss. Great to see you, ladies.
Good to see you guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. Rachel, this headline from Politico actually cracked me up. Trump tells allies he will run in 2024, but hints he may back out. I mean, like, what could be more perfect Donald Trump type headline?
Yeah, it's extremely Trumpian, but you know what? He's sly like a fox in some of these things. And I would say, like, one of my biggest critiques of Trump himself was that he never recognized his own election as anything more than a moment when it was a movement or when he could have made it a movement. And so I think he might be recognizing this slightly too late. And now he's saying, look, he's looking at all these people trying to redefine what it is to be MAGA, Trump, all these things. And he's saying, no, I still want a piece of that. And so I've said this before, but I think having him around is actually good and clarifying for the Republican Party, especially those elements that are trying to retract quickly back to Bushism. And so, again, I think it's good to have him in the mix.
I mean, I kind of agree, Rachel, because what I currently see, Jennifer, is I see Joe Biden. He gave a speech yesterday. He was like, 7 Republicans have told me that we're going to work together. And I'm like, oh, God, because anything that they're going to work on together is some sort of bipartisan consensus on like trade or, I mean, I can go down the list, foreign policy and more. But how do you generally see this from the Democratic side? I mean, we've talked about this before, but Trump kind of on the horizon, it almost freezes politics in time in 2016. I wouldn't say infighting, but how do you have the debates that are necessary whenever Trump is on the horizon kind of as this perfect boogeyman for people to point to and say, if you criticize me, this is who you're helping?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been pushing incessantly is to move post-Trump in our conversations, right? And I think no matter where you fall on the liberal spectrum, whether it's moderate or progressive or in between, centrist left, you have to get past Donald Trump. Now, the Republican Party is going to be stuck in Donald Trump for the next 4 years, regardless. And then 4 years after that, it's going to be Junior or Ivanka or somebody else. So I think the Republican Party is subject to Trumpism for the foreseeable future. I am advising any Democrat I come in contact with not to have those conversations anymore. We won this one decisively. I won't say it was by the skin of our teeth. It was decisively, but there were still indicators there that we need to move beyond Trump. So I think that progressives are going to push this president very, very hard on some of the policy prescriptions that he talked about while he was on the trail. So I actually think that you're going to see Democrats move more towards a post-Trump conversation than Republicans will.
I mean, Rachel, I do, look, obviously you and I have some different goals, although we do have some of the same goals as well. But I actually contest the idea that Trump still hanging out there is ultimately good for the Republican Party, because in a way him hanging out there sort of freezes the Democratic Party in place, because they can still be like, oh my God, we can't have any internal dissent because Donald Trump, unique evil, et cetera, and just run the same playbook. We're going to talk in the next segment about how the media is likely to respond in the next phase and with the Biden administration. But it freezes the Republican Party in place as well. And so as someone who really cares, Rachel, about policy and not just like the cult of Trump personality, what do you see as actually being beneficial about him being out there? Because it seems to me like he sort of freezes everything in place, all those debates, any sort of like soul searching or thoughts about what an ideology that could appeal to a more, broad-based multiracial working class would look like. Those all to me are off the table if Trump is pretending and playing will he, won't he on a 2024 run.
I think that might be true from the political side of it. You do have a lot of dynamics there. People don't want to criticize Trump if he's going to run again, all these things. But I do think it actually is going to be helpful for the policy conversation, because if you look back at Trump 2016, Trump 2015, he forced a lot of really difficult policy conversations in Republican corridors. I'm thinking particularly of the trade consensus. I'm thinking particularly of sort of this, deference to big corporate power, be it big finance or big tech or what have you. Right. He really pushed back on a lot of that and shattered some of the consensus and forced, I think, a lot of Republicans to grapple with the fact that our policies of the last 30 years really didn't work out the way that we anticipated. And my fear is that without Trump in the mix, there's people that don't want to have those conversations for very obvious self-interested reasons. And so if there's a way we can capture that dynamic, I think that is the really healthy part of Donald Trump for the Republican Party.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting because with him, the conversation doesn't happen, but you also get a lot of different stuff. But I guess that's the question, Rachel, which is that does the Trump who hangs around for the next 3 to 4 years, will he, won't he? Isn't it going to be more about like stop the steal than it is going to be anything on policy? I mean, he backed Tommy Tuberville over Jeff Sessions, right? Like he hasn't necessarily shown any personal adherence to this stuff. So how do you see that playing out over the next couple of years in terms of the litmus test that he's going to force upon people in the Republican Party?
Yeah, it's a great point about the stop the steal, because if that's the whole controlling narrative, then this experiment fails.
Right.
But I do think, Trump sort of untethered from the Washington interests, like Mitch McConnell telling him who to endorse, this deference to Capitol Hill Republicans. I think that it's an opportunity. I'm not here to be totally sanguine about the fact that it, might work. Crystal might be right. It might be completely an utter failure. But I do think that the Republican Party, the future of it is up for grabs. And so I do think that, more sort of dynamism on some of these policy questions, whether it comes from Trump or someone else, Trump is just the person who I think embodies the most sort of forcefulness on some of these questions.
Yeah.
And Jen, I'm getting like very strong sort of 2015 deja vu vibes, because I remember I covered the White House Correspondents' Dinner when Trump was playing this like maybe I'm going to run for president thing. And remember, Huffington Post classified his potential run as, what did they put in the entertainment section? Even after he launched, they still kept it in the entertainment section. And so I was covering the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I was actually doing this goofy, red carpet coverage thing, which I am so poorly suited to. It was utterly absurd. But one of the people who came in was Donald Trump with Melania. So I grab him, and first of all, he's already a voracious consumer of cable news. He's like, oh my God, Crystal Ball, I love you on the cycle. You and Torre and Ari, you guys are great. I'm like, okay. So I asked him like a serious question about his presidential run. And I also asked him if he ever found the birth certificate, that he sent investigators allegedly down to Hawaii to find President Obama. And he was like, wrong question, Crystal. But after the fact, I was sort of beating myself up like, why did you take this guy seriously? Obviously, this is just some sort of PR stunt. Like, you've sort of made yourself ridiculous by playing into his whole, like, oh, I'm going to run for president thing. And I kind of see some of those same narratives here where people aren't really taking serious the idea that he's actually could run again in 2024, and that if he does, he almost 100% will be the GOP nominee.
I mean, I might have egg on my face, but I think 100% he's running again in 2024. I don't believe he's going to back out for a second. I just don't think that he's learned any humility from this loss whatsoever. And, one of the things that I kick myself for is that I laughed hysterically as he was coming down the escalator in 2015, right? Just bowled over laughing, right? Now, I took him a lot more seriously earlier on than other folks after that. But at that moment, I thought it was the biggest joke in American politics I had ever seen. Well, joke's on me. But I have absolutely no doubt that he's going to run in 2024. And I've stopped underestimating him a number of years ago.
Well, you're smart, but I already see media takes being like, Trump's not going to run again. You people are fools. And these are like editor-in-chief of Politico. I'm like, yeah, well, I think you're going to be the fool.
Sure. Yeah. All right, guys, stick with us. We'll have more Team Rising right after this.